I never thought my 40th birthday would be the day my marriage died, I whispered to myself, frozen in the doorway of Daniel's home office. My husband didn't notice me. He was too focused on showing his assistant Olivia the divorce papers, spread across his mahogany desk. "The party timing is perfect," she purred, running her manicured fingers along his shoulder. "Once everyone leaves, you can tell Rachel everything's over." If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I'm sharing something extra special about what happened next. The spring evening had started beautifully. Our Lake Oswego home was filled with laughter and the scent of peonies, my favorite flowers, wafting through every room. Friends, colleagues, and family mingled in our garden, their voices carrying through the open French doors. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, from the handwritten place cards to the 3-tier cake waiting in our kitchen. "Have you seen Daniel?" I asked Natalie, who was admiring the koi pond. My best friend since college frowned slightly, her dark eyes scanning the crowd. "I think I saw him heading inside with Olivia, probably discussing some client emergency." Olivia Parker, his new executive assistant of 7 months, young, ambitious, and always impeccably dressed in designer suits. I'd noticed how she looked at him during the firm's Christmas party, but dismissed it as professional admiration. After all, Daniel was one of Portland's most respected financial advisors. Everyone in the industry admired him. "On your birthday?" Natalie's voice carried a note of concern. That's a bit much, even for Daniel. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. I'd been ignoring signs for months. The late nights at the office, mysterious weekend, client, meetings, the way he'd changed his phone password. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating us. "I'll go find them," I said, forcing a smile. "Make sure everyone's enjoying the champagne." I walked through our home, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The sound echoed through hallways lined with photos, vacations in Tuscany, Christmas mornings, weekend hikes in the Columbia Gorge. Each step felt heavier as I approached. Daniel's study, where light spilled from the partially open door. I heard their voices before I saw them, hushed but clear in the relative quiet. "Everything's prepared." Olivia's voice was silky and confident. "I've double-checked all the documents. Once you serve her the papers tonight, there's nothing she can do." "You're sure about the timing?" Daniel's voice, the one he used when strategizing with clients. "After the party seems cruel." "It's perfect timing," Olivia replied. "She'll be emotional, vulnerable, more likely to sign quickly without scrutinizing everything. We've worked too hard to let her discover the offshore accounts or the property transfers." I stood frozen, my hand pressed against the doorframe, my world tilting on its axis. The party sounds faded to a distant hum as blood rushed in my ears. Through the gap, I could see them clearly. Olivia perched on the edge of his desk, her skirt riding up her thighs, while Daniel leaned back in his leather chair. Divorce papers spread between them like a battle plan. "You're brilliant," Daniel said, reaching for her hand. "I couldn't have planned this without you. Once everything's settled, we can finally be together openly." "And the prenup?" Olivia asked, her fingers intertwining with his. Daniel laughed, that rich, confident laugh I'd once loved. "Ironclad. She'll walk away with barely enough to rent an apartment. After all, I drafted it myself." The crystal champagne flute in my hand suddenly felt too heavy. I watched as Olivia leaned down, her lips meeting Daniel's in a practiced kiss. They'd done this before, probably countless times in our home. "We should head back," Olivia said, pulling away. "People will notice we're gone." "Let them," Daniel replied, pulling her closer. "In a few hours, none of it will matter." I backed away from the door, my legs trembling. 15 years of marriage, of building a life together, and he'd planned to end it all on my birthday, in front of our friends and family. The humiliation would have been absolute, exactly as they'd planned. Natalie was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, concern etched across her face. One look at me and she knew. "That bastard," she whispered, taking the champagne flute from my shaking hand. "I need your help," I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. "And I need you to call your brother." Natalie's brother Michael was a divorce attorney who'd exposed some of Oregon's biggest marital frauds. If Daniel thought he could hide money from me, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. "Whatever you need," Natalie said, already pulling out her phone. "But first, we need to get through this party without letting them know you've discovered their plan." I nodded, straightening my shoulders. Daniel had taught me something after all. Sometimes the best defense is making your opponent think they're winning. "Help me fix my makeup," I said to Natalie. "We have a party to host." As I reapplied my lipstick in the powder room, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back, her eyes harder, her smile sharper. Daniel and Olivia thought they had orchestrated the perfect plan, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I walked back into the party, accepting birthday wishes with practiced grace. Daniel and Olivia had returned, standing slightly apart, playing their roles perfectly. I watched as he raised his glass in my direction, that familiar smile in place. "To my beautiful wife," he announced to the gathered crowd. "Happy birthday, darling." I smiled back, raising my fresh glass of champagne. Let them think they had the upper hand. Let them believe their plan was flawless. Because while they were plotting my humiliation, they'd given me something invaluable, the element of surprise. The party continued around me, but everything had changed. Each laugh felt hollow, each congratulation tainted. But beneath the pain and betrayal, something else was growing: determination. Daniel thought he'd written the perfect ending to our marriage. He was about to learn that this was just the beginning, and I would write the final chapter. The last guest left just before midnight, leaving behind empty champagne flutes and the lingering scent of peonies that now felt sickeningly sweet. I watched through the window as Daniel walked Olivia to her car, their bodies maintaining a careful distance, a performance for any watching eyes. "Don't break that," Natalie said softly, gently prying a crystal glass from my grip. "We need you thinking clearly." She was right. The fury coursing through my veins wouldn't help me. I needed precision and calculation, the same skills I'd used building my interior design firm while Daniel climbed the ranks at Blackwell Investments. "Michael's on his way," Natalie continued. "He said to secure any financial documents you can find without raising suspicion. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, anything that might show where Daniel's been hiding money." I nodded, mentally cataloging possible locations. "His study has a safe behind the Monet print. He thinks I don't know the combination, but I saw him input it last Christmas." The memory stung. I'd been watching him that day to see what he was hiding, thinking it might be my gift. How naive I'd been. The front door opened, and Daniel's footsteps echoed through the foyer. Natalie squeezed my hand. "Remember, let him think he's in control. We need time to build our case." If you're enjoying this story so far, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It truly means the world to me, and you won't want to miss what happens next when I turn the tables on Daniel and Olivia. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened, that practiced smile still in place. "Wonderful party, darling, though you must be exhausted. Why don't you head up to bed? I have a few client portfolios to review." Client portfolios. Is that what he called the divorce papers now? I forced a smile, years of hosting his firm's dinners making it feel almost natural. "Of course. Don't work too late." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Natalie gathered her things, playing her part perfectly. "Thanks for a lovely evening. Lunch tomorrow? Her tone was casual, but her eyes conveyed urgency. We had work to do. Perfect, I replied. That new place on Northwest 23rd. Once Natalie left, I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, our shared space of 15 years that now felt like a stranger's room. How many nights had he lain beside me, planning my downfall? How many mornings had he kissed me goodbye before meeting Olivia? I heard his study door close, followed by the muffled sound of his voice, probably calling Olivia, unable to wait even an hour before speaking to her again. I changed into silk pajamas, an anniversary gift from Daniel that I now wanted to burn, and pretended to settle into bed. 2 hours later, his footsteps moved from his study to the guest room. He didn't even try to hide it anymore, his excuse of late night work having worn thin months ago. Once I was certain he was asleep, I slipped out of bed. The house creaked, familiarly beneath my feet as I made my way to his study. The Monet print swung aside silently. I'd oiled the hinges last week under the guise of spring cleaning, revealing the wall's safe. 0715, our wedding date. The irony wasn't lost on me as the safe clicked open. Inside, organized with his typical precision, lay folders of documents.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
My hands trembled as I used my phone to photograph each page, careful to return them exactly as I'd found them. Bank statements showing large transfers to accounts I'd never seen. Property deeds for a lakefront cabin in Bend, purchased 8 months ago. And there at the bottom, a manila envelope containing a copy of the divorce papers he planned to serve me. I photographed everything, my lawyer's daughter instincts kicking in about maintaining evidence. As I reached to replace the last folder, something caught my eye. A small velvet jewelry box tucked in the back corner. Inside lay a platinum bracelet I'd never seen, the price tag still attached. An early birthday gift for Olivia, no doubt. The sound of a door opening somewhere in the house sent me into action. Everything back in place, safe closed, painting straightened. I was halfway to the door when Daniel's voice froze me in place. Trouble sleeping, darling. He stood in the doorway wearing the monogrammed robe I'd given him last Christmas, his expression curious, but I caught the flash of concern in his eyes. Good, let him worry. Looking for aspirin, I said, gesturing to my head. Too much champagne, I suppose. In your study, force of habit. I forgot you moved it to the guest bath. A pointed comment that made him shift uncomfortably. Right, well, try to get some rest. Big day at the firm tomorrow. I slipped past him, feeling his eyes on my back. In our bedroom, I finally allowed myself to breathe. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, weighted with evidence of his betrayal. I sent a quick text to Natalie. Documents secured. Meet earlier? Her response was immediate. 7 a.m. Michael's bringing a friend, a forensic accountant who owes him a favor. Sleep if you can. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, my mind racing through 15 years of memories, re-examining each for signs I'd missed. The late-night calls he'd step out to take, the business trips that multiplied after Olivia joined the firm, the way he'd grown protective of his phone. Around dawn, I heard him leave for his morning run, another recent habit that coincided with Olivia's early yoga sessions at the park near our house. How many of their plans had been made during those innocent-seeming exercise routines? Dressed carefully, selecting a cream silk blouse and charcoal pencil skirt that projected confidence and control. In the kitchen, I went through the motions of my morning routine, brewing coffee I wouldn't drink, setting out his preferred breakfast dishes. Daniel thought he had orchestrated the perfect betrayal, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail about me. I wasn't just his wife of 15 years. I was the woman who'd built a successful business from nothing, who'd navigated the cutthroat world of luxury design, who'd learned to read people as well as I read blueprints. And I was just getting started. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll know immediately when I post the next part of this story. You won't want to miss how I turned Daniel and Olivia's perfect plan into their worst nightmare. Leave a comment below if you've ever had to reinvent yourself after betrayal. Sometimes sharing our stories is the first step toward healing. Natalie was already waiting when I arrived at the Evergreen Cafe, Michael beside her with a petite woman I didn't recognize. I'd chosen this spot carefully, tucked away in northeast Portland, far from Daniel's usual downtown haunts. Daniel preferred sleek hotel bars for client meetings. He'd never set foot in this cozy cafe with its mismatched furniture and local art. "Elizabeth," Natalie said, standing to hug me. "This is Samantha Wong, best forensic accountant in Oregon." Samantha's handshake was firm, her expression serious. Michael filled me in. "You did well documenting everything last night, but we need to move fast. Men like Daniel, they always have contingency plans." "Tell them what you found," Michael urged, sliding a coffee toward me. For the next hour, I laid out everything. The hidden accounts, the property deeds, the carefully orchestrated plan to blindside me at my own birthday party. With each detail, Samantha's expression grew darker. "Classic signs of premeditated financial concealment," Samantha said, reviewing the photos on my phone. "The timing of the transfers, the property purchases through shell companies. He's been planning this for at least a year." "What do we do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Samantha leaned forward, her voice low. "First, we protect your assets. Then we gather more evidence. And finally," she smiled grimly, "we show Daniel exactly why you don't underestimate a woman who's built her own empire." As we outlined our strategy, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Dinner tonight to continue celebrating your birthday?" I showed the message to Michael, who nodded approvingly. "Perfect. Keep him. Thinking everything's normal?" Meanwhile, we're going to turn his perfect plan into his worst nightmare. Looking at the small group assembled around me, Natalie's fierce loyalty, Michael's legal brilliance, Samantha's analytical mind, I felt something I hadn't experienced since overhearing Daniel and Olivia in the study: hope. Daniel thought he'd orchestrated the perfect betrayal, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail about me. I wasn't just his wife of 15 years. I was the woman who'd navigated the cutthroat world of luxury design, who'd learned to read people's intentions before they spoke them aloud. And now I had a team. The next morning, I sat in Michael Reynolds' corner office on the 20th floor of a downtown high-rise, watching as he and Samantha pored over the documents I'd photographed. The city skyline stretched behind them, a stark contrast to the intimate betrayal we were dissecting. "Look at this," Samantha said, pointing to a series of transactions. "Regular transfers every third Friday starting 7 months ago. Always $98,500, just under the reporting threshold. Classic evasion tactic." Michael nodded, his expression grim. "And all going to an LLC registered in Nevada. Olivia Parker is listed as the sole director." He looked up at me. "When did you say she started working for Daniel?" 7 months and 2 weeks ago, I replied, the timeline suddenly crystallizing. Another piece clicked into place. Grace, Daniel's former assistant, she tried to warn me, said I should pay attention to the new hire. I thought she was just being protective. Natalie, who had taken the morning off from her gallery to support me, squeezed my hand. "You couldn't have known, Rachel. None of us saw this coming." "But I should have," I insisted. The signs were there. Grace's warning, the sudden changes in Daniel's behavior, the way Olivia seemed to know details about our home she shouldn't have known. Like how she mentioned our wine cellar organization system during that first dinner party we hosted after she was hired. "There's more," Samantha continued, pulling up another document. "The Bend cabin, it was purchased through a different LLC, but the funding came from an account in the Cayman Islands. An account opened with money transferred from your joint savings." The room spun slightly. Our joint savings, where we'd been storing money for retirement dreams that now felt Like cruel jokes. How much? I managed to ask. 7 million, Samantha said quietly. Almost exactly half of what was in the account. Michael scribbled something in his notepad. He's being careful, I'll give him that. Taking only half suggests he's trying to stay within legal bounds while hiding the transaction itself. What about the firm? Natalie asked. Could Blackwell Investments be involved? I shook my head. Blackwell's too respected to risk their reputation. But Peter Blackwell's son, Andrew, he and Daniel are close. I've seen them having lunch with Olivia several times. Andrew Blackwell, Michael repeated, typing the name into his computer. Interesting. He specializes in international asset management. We should look into any connections between him and these LLCs. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Of course he was. Olivia had Pilates on Tuesdays, which meant their routine evening meetup would follow. Good, Michael said, surprising me. That gives us time. Rachel, I need you to go back to your office and act completely normal. Meanwhile, we're going to set up surveillance on both Daniel and Olivia. I know someone, Samantha added. Former FBI, now private investigator. She's discreet and thorough. Natalie stood up, straightening her blazer. I'll drive you to your office, Rachel. We can't have your car parked here all day if we're maintaining appearances. As we rode the elevator down, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. I looked composed, professional, exactly as I needed to appear. But inside, questions tumbled through my mind. How many other secrets would we uncover? How deep did Daniel's betrayal go? Stop, Natalie said gently. I know that look. You're spiraling into the what-ifs. Stay focused on what we can prove, what we can act on. She was right. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I need to call my assistant, Megan. If Daniel checks the office calendar, everything needs to look routine. Back at Mitchell Interiors, I threw myself into work. We had 3 major projects in development: a waterfront restaurant renovation, a boutique hotel lobby, and a historic home restoration. My team noticed nothing unusual as I reviewed designs, met with clients, and handled vendor calls. Only Megan, my assistant of 6 years, sensed something was off. She'd been with me long enough to read my subtle cues. During a quiet moment between meetings, she closed my office door. Is everything okay? She asked. You seem different since the birthday party. I considered her carefully. Megan wasn't just an assistant. She was an ally who'd helped build this company. More importantly, she handled all my business accounting. If Daniel had tampered with any of the company's accounts, she might have noticed. Close the blinds, I said, making a decision, and pull up all our banking records from the past year. Megan's eyes widened, but she complied without question. For the next hour, we combed through every transaction, every account balance. Everything looked normal until... Wait, Megan said, pointing to a series of entries. These wire transfers? To our Italian suppliers. Something's not right. I leaned closer. We regularly transferred large sums to Italian artisans for custom pieces, but these amounts seemed inflated. Pull up the original invoices, I requested. Megan dug through, our files spreading papers across my desk. Look at this. The actual invoices are for less than what was transferred. The difference was diverted somewhere else. My stomach churned. Daniel had access to the company accounts as my husband and occasional financial advisor. He'd been skimming from my own business, probably counting on me trusting him too much to check the details. I photographed everything, sending the images to Michael and Samantha. Within minutes, Samantha replied, "This is exactly what we needed. Clear evidence of financial misconduct using your company's accounts." Michael's message followed, "Don't confront him yet. We're building a case that will leave him no wiggle room." Megan watched me, concern etched on her face. "What do you need me to do?" For now, nothing obvious. But I need you to flag any unusual transactions, especially international transfers. And Megan, I met her eyes. This stays between us. She nodded firmly. Of course, you built this company from nothing, Rachel. I won't let anyone threaten that. By late afternoon, Samantha's investigator had already made progress. Natalie forwarded me photos showing Daniel and Olivia leaving a real estate office in Selwood. Not his usual territory. His firm's offices were downtown. The agent they met specializes in luxury condos, Samantha's message explained. Same real estate group that handled the Bend cabin. They were house hunting, planning their future while dismantling mine. The thought should have devastated me, but instead, it hardened my resolve. I worked late, knowing Daniel wouldn't be home anyway. In the quiet of my office, surrounded by the designs and plans that represented years of hard work, I began my own investigation, documenting every joint account, every shared investment, every property decision. Around 8, Natalie brought dinner and news. The PI followed them to a restaurant on Mississippi Avenue. Very cozy, very intimate. She got photos and audio. I forced myself to eat while Natalie played the recording. Daniel's voice, warm and intimate in a way it hadn't been with me for months, discussing their future plans. After the Whitmore portfolio closes, Daniel was saying, the publicity from landing it will overshadow any gossip about the divorce. Plus, the bonus will help with the new place. The Whitmore portfolio, his biggest acquisition of the year. The irony wasn't lost on me. Send everything to Michael, I said, pushing away my barely touched dinner. And I need you to do something else for me, something Daniel would never expect. Natalie raised an eyebrow. What? Call your friend at the Portland Tribune, the one who writes the society column. I think it's time to ensure our divorce gets exactly the right kind of attention. As Natalie made the call, I stared out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Daniel and Olivia were planning their happy ending. But they'd forgotten something crucial. Every good story needs a plot twist, and I was about to deliver one they'd never see coming. The Tribune Society columnist, Victoria Parker, met me for coffee at an obscure cafe in St. John's, far from Daniel's usual haunts. Natalie's connection had paid off. Victoria was intrigued by the possibility of an exclusive story about one of Portland's most prominent financial advisors. So, Victoria said, stirring her latte, you want me to hold this information until exactly the right moment? Yes, I replied, sliding across a folder of carefully selected documents. These show the timeline of their relationship, the property purchases, the financial transfers. But there's more coming when the Whitmore portfolio closes next month. That's when you break the story. Right when he's expecting to bask in the publicity of landing his biggest client, Victoria finished, thumbing through the papers. Deliciously strategic. But why tell me now? Because I need you to start laying the groundwork, small mentions, of their professional relationship, innocent coverage of their public appearances. Make them feel secure, watched but safe. Victoria's smile widened. Make them think they're controlling the narrative. Exactly. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from Samantha's PI. More photos of Daniel and Olivia, this time entering a private viewing at an exclusive jewelry store on Northwest 23rd Street. The same one where he'd bought my engagement ring 15 years ago. Look at this, I said, showing Victoria the photos. They're not even trying to hide anymore. They think they're untouchable, Victoria replied, her tone knowing. I've covered enough high-profile divorces to recognize the pattern. They think their power makes them invisible. After Victoria left, I met with Michael and Samantha at their temporary command center, a private office they'd rented under Samantha's consulting firm's name. The walls were covered with timelines, financial charts, and surveillance photos. 6 weeks of investigation had revealed a betrayal far deeper than I'd initially imagined. The jewelry store visit confirms it. Samantha said, pinning up the latest photos. He's liquidating assets through luxury purchases, harder to trace than direct transfers. Michael nodded, adding another note to his growing file. Classic strategy. The jewelry becomes gifts that can be sold later for cash, but he made a mistake. The store requires insurance registration for major purchases. We can subpoena those records. Natalie burst in, waving her tablet. You need to see this. Olivia just updated her private Instagram account. The photo showed a delicate hand, Olivia's, resting on a restaurant table, a distinctive diamond, bracelet glinting on her wrist. The caption was cryptic. New beginnings coming soon. The location tag showed an upscale restaurant in Vancouver, Washington, 2 hours from Portland. They're getting sloppy, Michael observed. Too confident. This helps us establish a pattern of ongoing relationship. There's more, Natalie continued, scrolling through her tablet. I had my gallery assistant do some digging. Olivia isn't just Daniel's assistant. She used to work for Andrew Blackwell directly. The pieces clicked together. That's how they met, I said, standing to pace the room. Andrew must have introduced them, knowing Daniel was looking for a new assistant when Grace retired. Samantha was already typing on her laptop. Let me check something. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Got it. Andrew's listed as a director on one of the LLCs that received money from Daniel's hidden accounts. They're all in it together, I realized. Andrew helped set up the offshore accounts, introduced Daniel to Olivia, probably helped plan the whole thing. Michael was making notes rapidly. This is good. The more people involved, the more likely someone will crack under pressure. He was interrupted by my phone ringing. Daniel's face appeared on the screen. I held up a hand for silence and answered, keeping my voice casual. Hi, honey. Rachel. Daniel's voice was warm, practiced. I was thinking about our anniversary next month. What if we took a trip, just the two of us? My heart pounded. Our anniversary was 3 weeks after the Whitmore portfolio closed, when he was planning to serve the divorce papers. He wanted to take me away to do it privately, minimize the public scandal. That sounds wonderful, I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. Where were you thinking? Cannon Beach, like our honeymoon. The same place he'd promised we'd return to. For our 15th anniversary, now I understood. He wanted to recreate our happiest memory before destroying it all. Perfect, I said. Should I call our travel agent? No need. I'll have Olivia handle all the arrangements. Of course he would. I ended the call and turned to the others, my hands shaking with rage. He's planning to serve me the divorce papers during our anniversary trip to Cannon Beach. Natalie swore under her breath. Michael, however, looked thoughtful. This could work in our favor. If he's focusing on the anniversary plan, he'll be distracted from what we're doing, which is exactly what we need. Samantha added, pulling up another document. Because look what I found in the LLC paperwork. Olivia's not just listed as a director. She's been receiving a salary from one of Daniel's client companies for the past year. I moved closer to see the screen. The company name was familiar, Whitmore Industries. Why would they be paying her? I asked. They wouldn't, Michael said grimly. Unless Daniel arranged it as part of his services, which means he's been billing clients for her salary while she's supposedly working as his assistant. That's fraud. And not just against you, against his firm and his clients. The implications were staggering. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me. He'd compromised his entire career, his professional ethics, everything he'd spent decades building. Megan called as we were processing this latest revelation. Rachel, there's something else. I've been going through old records and I found something strange. Remember that charity fundraiser Daniel helped organize last year? The Children's Hospital benefit? What about it? The donations that were supposed to go through our company account as sponsorship, they never reached the hospital. They were redirected to another account first. My blood ran cold. Daniel had handled all the legal aspects of my company's charitable giving. How much? $300,000. Megan's voice was tight with anger. I've got the paper trail. He used our company's reputation to legitimize the transfers, then diverted the funds. I shared this new information with the others. Michael immediately grasped the significance. This is perfect. Charitable fraud is toxic for a financial advisor's reputation. No client would trust him after this comes to light. We need to move carefully, Samantha cautioned. Start gathering sworn statements from everyone involved. Megan, the hospital administrators, the bank officers who handled the transfers. Natalie was already making calls, her gallery assistant researching more connections between Olivia, Andrew Blackwell, and Daniel's other clients. As the evidence mounted, a clear picture emerged. Daniel hadn't just planned to divorce me. He'd orchestrated a years-long conspiracy involving multiple parties, using my business, his firm's resources, and even charitable donations to fund his new life with Olivia. The Whitmore portfolio closes in 3 weeks, Michael said, reviewing our timeline. Then he plans to take you to Cannon Beach 2 weeks after that. We need to be ready before then. I stared at the wall of evidence, each photo and document representing another layer of betrayal. Daniel thought he was playing a sophisticated game, but he'd forgotten something crucial about me. I'd spent 15 years watching him work, learning how he thought, understanding his strategies. Call Victoria, I told Natalie. Tell her to start dropping those breadcrumbs in her column. Let's make Daniel and Olivia feel secure in their perfect plan. As Natalie made the call, I added one final note to our timeline. Anniversary trip, Cannon Beach. But unlike Daniel's version, this wouldn't be an ending. It would be my beginning. Victoria's first article appeared in the Portland Tribune Society pages 3 days later, a seemingly innocent piece about power couples in Portland's financial world. Daniel and I were featured prominently, with a subtle mention of his dedicated new assistant who had helped streamline his prestigious practice. The photo showed us at my birthday party, Daniel's arm around my waist, Olivia visible in the deep background. Perfect, Michael said, reading the article in his office, establishing the background while hiding the knife. I studied the photo, remembering the moment it was taken, just minutes after I'd overheard them in the study. All of us playing our parts perfectly. Daniel called me this morning, I said. He's already booked the Cannon Beach trip through Olivia. Of course, Natalie muttered from her position by the window. Because every husband has his secretary book his anniversary trip. Samantha entered carrying a thick folder. Speaking of Olivia, you won't believe what we found. She spread documents across Michael's desk. She's been busy. 3 new bank accounts opened in the past month, all under different variations. Of her name, Olivia Parker, O.P. Williams, Liv Williams. Williams? I asked, the name triggering something in my memory. Her mother's maiden name, Samantha confirmed. She's establishing alternate identities, classic preparation for moving money quietly. Michael picked up one of the documents. These accounts, they're all at banks where Whitmore Industries does business. Exactly. Samantha pulled up more records on her laptop. And look at this. Whitmore Industries just opened a new division in Bend, Oregon. Care to guess who's handling the legal work? Andrew Blackwell, I said, the pieces clicking together. They're setting up their escape route, once the divorce is final. They'll probably transfer Olivia to the Bend office, with Daniel joining later under the guise of expanding the firm's regional presence. Not if we can help it, Michael replied grimly. These regional accounts give us leverage. No judge looks kindly on hidden assets, especially when they cross county and state lines to avoid detection. Natalie's phone buzzed. Megan just sent something interesting. Daniel visited your office yesterday while you were at the site meeting. My head snapped up. What? Security footage shows him accessing your private files. Megan says he spent almost an hour in your office. Michael was already reaching for his phone. We need to sweep for devices. If he's planted anything? No, I interrupted, a realization hitting me. He wasn't planting anything. He was looking for evidence that I know. I turned to Samantha. Can we use this? The unauthorized access? Definitely. It shows consciousness of guilt, plus potential corporate espionage if he accessed any client. Files. A knock at the door made us all freeze. Michael's assistant poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here you need to meet. She stepped aside, revealing an elegant older woman I recognized immediately. Grace, I stood, shocked to see Daniel's former assistant. What are you doing here? Grace Turner, no relation to Olivia, had been Daniel's assistant for 18 years before her sudden retirement. She closed the door behind her, her expression determined. I've been following Victoria's column, reading between the lines, and it's time you knew the real reason I retired. For the next hour, Grace revealed a pattern of behavior that made my blood run cold. Daniel and Andrew Blackwell had been planning this for years. Olivia wasn't just a random hire. She'd been carefully selected and groomed for her role. They started positioning her 2 years ago, Grace explained. Andrew would bring her to firm events, introduce her around. I noticed how she always managed to be wherever Daniel was. Then the documents started disappearing. What documents? Michael asked sharply. Financial records, client billing statements. At first, I thought I was just misplacing things. Then I found copies of privileged documents in Olivia's desk, papers she shouldn't have had access to. Did you confront them? I asked. Grace's laugh was bitter. I tried. That's when the threat started. Subtle at first, comments about my age, about modernizing the firm. Then Andrew Blackwell made it clear. Take early retirement with a generous package or face accusations of incompetence. They forced you out, Natalie realized, to make way for Olivia. And to protect their scheme, Grace added. I have copies of everything I managed to document. Dates, transactions, meetings. I've been waiting for the right moment to come. Forward. Michael was already pulling out a legal pad. We need to get your official statement. This establishes a long-term pattern of conspiracy. As Grace detailed everything she'd witnessed, I remembered all the times she'd tried to warn me in her subtle way. The concerned looks, the careful comments about keeping my own records, her insistence that I maintain separate accounts for my business. There's something else, Grace said, reaching into her bag. The day before I left, I made copies of Daniel's private calendar, including entries about meetings with Olivia going back 18 months before I retired. Samantha whistled softly as she reviewed the calendar. This is gold, shows premeditation, directly contradicts any claim that the relationship started after she was hired. Why didn't you show me this before? I asked Grace softly. She met my eyes. Would you have believed it then? Sometimes we need to discover the truth in our own time, when we're ready to see it. She was right. Even if she'd shown me proof months ago, I probably would have found ways to explain it away. I needed to catch them in the act myself to finally accept the truth. Natalie's phone buzzed again. Another update from the PI. Daniel and Olivia just had lunch with Andrew Blackwell at that new place in the Pearl District. They looked celebratory. The Whitmore portfolio, Michael said. The deal closes next week. They must be confident about landing it. I stood, moving to the window. Below, Portland's financial district hummed with activity, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this office. They think everything's falling into place. The deal will close, the divorce will be handled quietly during the Cannon Beach trip, and they'll start their new life with no one the wiser. Speaking of the Whitmore portfolio, Samantha interjected, I found something interesting in those records. There's a connection to the Bend property, a series of transactions that look unusual. Michael leaned forward. What kind of connection? The kind that suggests Daniel might be using privileged information from one client to benefit another. If this is what I think it is, it's not just fraud, it's securities manipulation. Grace nodded slowly. That fits with patterns I noticed. Daniel and Andrew were always very careful about keeping certain client files separate from the main system. The implications were staggering. Daniel hadn't just betrayed me. He'd potentially compromised multiple client relationships, violated securities regulations, and exposed his firm to massive liability. "We need to move carefully," Michael cautioned. "This is bigger than a divorce case now. We're talking potential criminal charges." "Good," I said, my voice hard. "Let them use everything while they're focused on the Whitmore portfolio and planning their perfect getaway. We'll be building a trap they can't escape." Natalie squeezed my hand. "What's our next move?" I looked at the team assembled around me. Michael with his legal expertise, Samantha with her financial acumen, Natalie with her unwavering support, Grace with her damning evidence, and Megan still digging through company records. We let them play out their hand, I decided. Let Daniel close the Whitmore deal. Let him think everything's going according to plan. Meanwhile, we document everything, build our case, and prepare. "Prepare for what?" Natalie prompted. "For when I serve him divorce papers," I smiled grimly. "At the exact moment he plans to serve me in Cannon Beach, in front of everyone who matters in his world." The room fell silent as they absorbed the audacity of the plan. Finally, Michael nodded approvingly. "Poetic justice, but we'll need to time everything perfectly." "Leave that to me," Grace said. "I still have friends at the firm. I can help. Coordinate the timing." As we began plotting out the details, I felt a strange sense of calm. Daniel had spent years crafting his betrayal, thinking he was the master strategist. But he'd forgotten something crucial. He wasn't the only one who knew how to play the long game. And my game was just beginning. The Whitmore portfolios. Closing day arrived with the kind of media coverage Daniel had always craved. Local news stations clustered outside Blackwell Investments, their cameras trained on my husband as he strode up the steps, projecting confidence in his bespoke Italian suit. Olivia walked 2 careful steps behind him, carrying his briefcase and looking every bit the devoted assistant. I watched the coverage from Michael's office, noting how Olivia's designer outfit probably cost more than a month's legitimate salary. "Ready?" Michael asked, straightening his tie. "Absolutely." I smoothed down my own suit, a power outfit I'd chosen specifically for today. "Grace's contact confirmed everything's in place?" "Yes. Your name's on the witness list as a character witness for the Whitmore signing. Daniel has no idea. We added it last minute." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Daniel had been so focused on the complex financial aspects of the Whitmore deal, he hadn't bothered to review the final witness list thoroughly. Why would he? His wife had no connection to the deal, or so he thought. Natalie met us at Blackwell Investments, Samantha beside her with a briefcase full of documents. "Olivia just went in," Natalie reported. "She looked nervous." "She should be," Samantha replied grimly. "Wait until she sees what's coming." We entered the conference room just as the proceedings were about to begin. Daniel was at the head table, his head bent close to Lawrence Whitmore as they whispered urgently. He didn't notice us sitting in the observer section, another miscalculation on his part. Peter Blackwell's opening remarks were brief, laying out the terms of Whitmore Industries' portfolio management. Throughout it all, Daniel maintained his composed demeanor, occasionally making notes or whispering to Andrew. Olivia sat directly behind him, her face a mask of professional attention. Then Peter Blackwell announced, "Before we proceed to signatures, we have a few character witnesses to speak about the integrity of our firm and this partnership. First, we'll hear from Rachel Mitchell, wife of our lead portfolio manager." The reaction was immediate. Daniel's head snapped up from his notes, his face showing genuine shock. Olivia dropped her pen, scrambling to retrieve it as I walked confidently to the podium. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell," I smiled, placing my notes carefully on the stand. As Daniel's wife of 15 years, I've had a unique perspective on not just his personal integrity, but his approach to client funds. The silence in the conference room was absolute. Daniel froze, his practiced poise cracking. "I don't understand," he whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "Through my interior design firm," I continued pleasantly, "I've had the privilege of working with several Blackwell clients, including recent projects for Whitmore Industries executive retreats. In fact, I have quite detailed records of our financial arrangements." Daniel's face had gone pale. He knew what was coming. All those transactions he'd hidden, all the money he'd diverted through my company's accounts. It was all about to come to light. "Mr. Blackwell," he stammered, "I request a brief recess." "Let's continue," Peter Blackwell replied, his expression unreadable. "Please proceed, Mrs. Mitchell." For the next 30 minutes, I led the room through a carefully choreographed presentation. Every point I made opened another door Daniel didn't want opened. Every attempt he made to interrupt only made things worse. Through it all, I maintained a pleasant, helpful demeanor. Just a dutiful wife supporting her husband's firm. "And these financial records," I said, gesturing to the documents Samantha had provided, "show a pattern of transactions that might be relevant to Mr. Whitmore's decision-making process." Daniel was sweating now, his perfect composure shattered. In the audience, Olivia sat rigid with tension, her knuckles white around her notebook. She could see it too, their careful plans beginning to unravel. "No further comments," I finally concluded, stepping away from the podium. Lawrence Whitmore rose, a predatory gleam in his eye. He'd been briefed about what was coming. "Mrs. Mitchell, could you elaborate on these financial records, particularly the offshore transfers?" "Objection!" Daniel shot to his feet, then realized this wasn't a courtroom. "Actually," Lawrence Whitmore smiled thinly, "these records were submitted to my team last week. Perhaps you missed them in your review." For the next hour, the meeting disintegrated into a detailed examination of fund management practices. By the time the session adjourned, pending further financial review, the Whitmore deal was effectively dead. As we left the conference room, I watched Daniel and Olivia huddled with Andrew in a corner, their urgent whispers carrying an edge of panic. Peter Blackwell had joined them, his face dark with concern. "Phase 1 accomplished," Michael said quietly as we left the building. "They know they're vulnerable now, but they don't yet realize how much we know." Natalie was practically bouncing with satisfaction. "Did you see Andrew's face when you mentioned the Bend property connections? I thought he was going to faint." "Daniel will try damage control," Samantha warned. "He'll want to know how much you've discovered, how long you've been investigating." "Let him wonder," I replied, feeling truly confident for the first time in weeks. While he's scrambling to cover his tracks here, he won't see what's coming next. Back at Michael's office, we reviewed the day's events. Grace had been right. Daniel had been using privileged information from multiple clients to orchestrate his financial schemes. Today's presentation had exposed just enough to make him nervous while holding back our biggest revelations for later. "Whitmore is going to start asking questions," Michael predicted, "about where his money's really been going, about why his financial advisor's wife seems to know so much about his private accounts." "And the firm?" I asked. "Already requesting additional banking records," Michael confirmed. "Once they start pulling those threads," my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "We need to talk about what happened today." I showed it to the others. Natalie snorted. "He's probably trying to figure out how to spin this, make you look like you're confused about the transactions." "Let him try," I replied, deleting the message without responding. The evidence speaks for itself. As we prepared to leave for the day, Grace called with an update from her sources at the firm. The partners are asking questions, she reported, especially about Andrew's involvement with Whitmore's accounts. They're planning an internal audit. Everything was falling into place. The first cracks had appeared in Daniel's perfect facade, and they would only grow larger. He'd spent years building his house of cards, thinking he was untouchable. Today, we'd pulled out the first card. Soon, the whole thing would come crashing down. I arrived home to find Daniel waiting in the kitchen, his tie loosened, a glass of scotch in his hand. "Want to tell me what that was about today?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Just doing my civic duty," I replied innocently. "After all, you always say everyone should be transparent in business dealings." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Some of those records you mentioned, where did you get them?" "Oh, you know me," I smiled, heading upstairs. "I like to keep good business records for tax purposes." Let him stew on that, I thought as I closed our bedroom door. Let him wonder what else I might have documented, what else I might know. The Cannon Beach trip was 2 weeks away. By then, we'd have everything in place for the final act of this drama. Daniel thought today was just an unfortunate surprise. He had no idea it was just the beginning. As I got ready for bed, I heard him on the phone in his study, his voice carrying an edge of urgency I'd never heard before. Phase 1 had accomplished exactly what we'd hoped, the first victory in what would become his complete undoing. And I was just getting started. The morning after my testimony at Blackwell Investments, Portland's financial community was buzzing with speculation. Victoria's latest column, strategically placed in the Tribune's business section, raised subtle questions about the connections between the Whitmore portfolio and several other high-profile clients represented by the firm. I sat in my office at Mitchell Interiors, watching the dominoes begin to fall. Megan had just forwarded an email from Blackwell's senior partner requesting a meeting to discuss our ongoing business relationship. They were getting nervous. "Mrs. Mitchell?" my intercom buzzed. "There's a Mr. Whitmore here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." I exchanged glances with Natalie, who had been reviewing our latest evidence. This was unexpected, but not unwelcome. "Send him in." Lawrence Whitmore strode into my office looking considerably less polished than he had in yesterday's meeting. His designer suit was slightly rumpled, his face bearing the shadows of a sleepless night. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, declining my offer to sit, "I think we need to have a frank discussion about what's really going on." "Of course," I replied, gesturing for Natalie to stay as she moved to leave. "What would you like to discuss?" Whitmore paced, agitation clear in every movement. "Those transactions you mentioned yesterday, the ones involving my properties, and your design firm. I've been up all night reviewing them with my private accountants, and they don't match our official records. There are discrepancies, large ones. Money that was supposed to go to renovations but seems to have disappeared." I opened my laptop, turning it to show him a spreadsheet Megan had prepared. "You mean transactions like these?" His face paled as he scanned the numbers. "These are different from what Daniel showed me. He said all the extra costs were for premium materials, custom orders from Italy." "Some were," I acknowledged, "but not all. Notice the routing numbers on these transfers." Whitmore leaned closer, his banking background evident in the way he quickly grasped the implications. "These went through shell companies before reaching your vendors. But why would Daniel—" He trailed off, realization dawning. "He's been skimming from the transactions." "Not just from yours," I added quietly. "We found similar patterns with other clients." Whitmore sank into a chair, his composure finally cracking. "The SEC has been examining my companies for months. Daniel promised he could handle it, said he had everything under control. But if these transactions come to light, they already have." I handed him a copy of the latest court filings. "The state's Financial Regulation Board submitted subpoenas this morning for all related banking records." "I'll be ruined," Whitmore whispered. Then his head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Unless you're showing me this for a reason. What do you want?" "The truth," I replied simply. "About everything. Daniel's involvement, Andrew Blackwell's role, all of it. In exchange, my evidence might help show you were also a victim of—" Frauta Whitmore was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he reached for his phone. "I need to make some calls, starting with the regulatory board." After he left, Natalie let out a low whistle. "That was unexpected. Think he'll really turn on Daniel?" "He has to," I replied. "It's his only play now. Better to be seen as a victim than a co-conspirator." My phone buzzed, a message from Daniel. "We need to talk about Whitmore coming to your office." Natalie raised an eyebrow. "Perfect timing. Want me to stay?" "No, but have Samantha ready with the recording equipment. Every conversation counts now." 20 minutes later, Daniel arrived looking immaculate as always, but with tension visible around his eyes. Olivia wasn't with him. Interesting. "Rachel?" he began, closing my office door. "About yesterday." "About the evidence of financial fraud?" I interrupted pleasantly. "Or about how your client just left my office with proof that you've been manipulating his accounts?" Daniel froze for a split second before recovering. "There seems to be some confusion about those transactions. If you'll let me explain." "Explain what? How you used my company to launder money? How you and Andrew set up fake vendor accounts to siphon funds? Or maybe you'd like to explain Olivia's role in all this." "Olivia?" His laugh was forced. "She's just my assistant. She processes paperwork, nothing more." "Really?" I turned my monitor to show him a document. "Then why is she listed as director on 3 companies that received diverted funds? Companies registered to the same address as your cabin in Bend?" The color drained from his face. "How did you get access to these records?" I smiled. Let's just say Grace was very thorough in her documentation before she retired. Daniel sank into a chair, his perfect posture crumbling. "Rachel, whatever you think you know, I know everything, Daniel. Every transaction, every secret meeting, every plan you and Olivia made, including your plans for our anniversary trip." His head snapped up. "Cannon Beach? Did I really think serving me divorce papers on the beach where we honeymooned was clever? Or was that Olivia's idea of poetic justice?" Before he could respond, my intercom buzzed again. "Mrs. Mitchell, there are some gentlemen here from the State Financial Regulation Board. They have a warrant." Daniel stood so quickly he knocked over his chair. I pressed the intercom button. "Send them in." "Rachel," he said urgently, "whatever you're doing, think carefully. We can work something out." "Like you worked things out with Whitmore? With the charitable funds for the children's hospital renovation?" The door opened to reveal 2 serious-looking men in dark suits. "Daniel Mitchell?" one asked, though it clearly wasn't a question. "We need you to come with us. We have some questions about certain financial transactions." As they led Daniel out, I saw Olivia rushing down the hallway, panic clear on her face. She stopped short at the sight of the agents, her designer handbag slipping from nerveless fingers. My phone lit up with messages. "Michael. Regulation Board got Whitmore's statement. They're moving on Andrew Blackwell next." "Samantha. Blackwell Investments Board just called an emergency meeting." "Victoria. My story about the charity funds just went live." "Megan. The firm's partners are here. They want to see all our records." Everything was unraveling faster than even we had planned. Daniel's carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing, taking Olivia and Andrew down with it. I stepped into the hallway where Olivia stood frozen, watching Daniel being escorted to the elevator. "You should call a lawyer," I told her quietly. "A good one. You'll need it." She turned to me, her composure finally breaking. "You don't understand. We never meant to get caught," I finished. That's the thing about secrets, Olivia. They always come out eventually. Back in my office, I called Michael to update him. Daniel just got picked up by the financial regulators. Olivia's falling apart. How long until they move on Andrew Blackwell? Already happening, he replied. Grace's evidence was the key. Once they saw the pattern of client fund manipulation. And the Cannon Beach trip? Still on as far as they know, but now we have a new wrinkle. The firm's senior partners want to meet with you tomorrow. They're talking about a full audit of all cases involving your company. I smiled, remembering all the careful documentation Megan and I had prepared. Perfect time to show them exactly how their star financial advisor has been operating. As the day's events unfolded, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. The life I'd built with Daniel was over, but it had died long before today. What was ending now was the illusion, the carefully maintained facade of perfection. My phone buzzed one final time, a message from Grace. Just heard from my contact at the firm. They've suspended Daniel pending investigation. Olivia's been escorted out of the building. The first phase of our plan had succeeded beyond expectations, but we weren't done yet. The Cannon Beach trip was still 10 days away, and I had one final card to play. Daniel thought today was devastating. He had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I sat across from Peter Blackwell and the firm's ethics committee in their downtown conference room. The view of Mount Hood was spectacular, but nobody was admiring the scenery. Mrs. Mitchell, Peter began, his voice grave. First, let me express our profound regret about this situation. Had we known what Daniel was doing— But you should have known, I interrupted calmly, placing a thick folder on the table. These red flags were apparent for over a year. Grace Turner reported her concerns 3 times before her retirement. The committee members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Jeffrey Harmon, the firm's general counsel, leaned forward. We're conducting a thorough internal investigation. Any information you have would be extremely helpful in containing this situation. Containing it? I raised an eyebrow. I think we're well beyond containment, Mr. Harmon. The state regulators have the banking records. The Tribune has the story. Lawrence Whitmore is cooperating with authorities. The firm's reputation, Peter began. Is the least of your concerns right now? Michael interjected smoothly. The real question is whether Blackwell Investments was complicit or merely negligent in its oversight. That got their attention. Fear flickered across Peter's face. What exactly are you suggesting? I opened the folder, removing a series of documents. Andrew Blackwell's involvement wasn't peripheral. He was an architect of this scheme, using the firm's resources and reputation to facilitate fraud across multiple client accounts. That's a serious accusation, Harmon said, but his tone lacked conviction. Which is why we've prepared this. Michael slid a document across the table. A comprehensive timeline of transactions, meetings, and communications. Everything the prosecutors will need to determine who knew what and when. For the next hour, we laid out the evidence methodically. Daniel and Andrew's systematic deception, the misused client funds, the shuffling of assets through my business, the shell companies registered to Olivia. With each revelation, the committee members grew paler. Why are you sharing this with us? Peter finally asked. You could take this directly to the authorities. I already have, I replied. But Blackwell Investments has been a respected institution in Portland for decades. Its failure would hurt many innocent people, clients, employees, the community, organizations you support. You're offering us a chance to cooperate, Harmon realized. More than that, Michael said. We're offering you a chance to lead the cleanup, to demonstrate that the firm's integrity transcends the actions of 2 corrupt individuals. Hope flickered in Peter's eyes. What would that entail? Full transparency, complete cooperation with authorities, making clients whole for any losses, and— I paused, meeting his gaze directly. A substantial donation to restore the diverted charitable funds with interest. The meeting lasted another 2 hours as we hammered out the details. By the time we left, Blackwell Investments had committed to everything we'd asked for, plus a public statement acknowledging the fraud and distancing the firm from Daniel and Andrew. That went even better than expected, Michael commented as we rode the elevator down. Peter's no fool, I replied. He knows the firm would never survive fighting this. Their only path forward is to get ahead of the story. Outside, Victoria was waiting by her car. Got your message. The firm's making a statement? In about an hour, I confirmed. You'll want to be there. She studied me curiously. You're saving the firm that harbored your husband while he betrayed you. Why? Because destroying Blackwell wouldn't undo what Daniel did. It would just create more victims. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. And the anniversary trip to Cannon Beach? Still planning to go through with it? Absolutely, I smiled. Some vows need proper closure. Later that afternoon, I watched from my office as Peter Blackwell addressed a hastily assembled press conference. He looked appropriately somber as he announced the firm had uncovered serious financial improprieties by 2 senior advisors who had been terminated effective immediately. The firm was cooperating fully with authorities and would ensure no client suffered financial harm. What he didn't mention was that those same authorities were currently executing search warrants at Daniel and Andrew's homes, or that Olivia was being interviewed by investigators at that very moment. Natalie brought coffee and sandwiches, which we ate while watching the coverage. Daniel's attorney called Michael, she reported. He's looking for a deal. What kind of deal? The desperate kind. He wants to meet, just you and him, before the Cannon Beach trip. He claims he can explain everything. I considered this. What does Michael think? He thinks Daniel's looking for any leverage he can find. The evidence against him is overwhelming, but he doesn't know exactly what we have and what we don't. Tell Michael to agree to the meeting, but on our terms. Public place, recorded conversation. Michael present as my counsel. Natalie typed out the message. You know he's just going to try to manipulate you, right? It's what he does. I'm counting on it, I replied. One last conversation for the record. The meeting was set for 2 days later at the Evergreen Cafe, neutral territory with plenty of witnesses. Daniel arrived looking noticeably diminished. His bespoke suit hung slightly loose, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Prison does that to people, even temporary custody while arranging bail. Rachel, he began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. Thank you for meeting me. I'm here as a courtesy, I replied coolly. You have 15 minutes. He glanced uneasily at Michael, who sat beside me with a recording device plainly visible on the table. Could we speak privately? No, I said simply. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my attorney. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. This has all spiraled out of control. The things they're saying about me, about us, it's not what you think. Then what is it, Daniel? Explain to me how diverting funds through my business, setting up offshore accounts, and planning to divorce me on our anniversary trip is not what I think. It started small, he said, leaning forward earnestly, just managing taxes more efficiently for a few clients. Then Andrew suggested we could do more, optimize returns through some alternative investments. Alternative investments? Michael's tone was incredulous. Is that what we're calling fraud now? Daniel ignored him, focusing on me. Rachel, I never meant to hurt you. Things with Olivia, they just happened. A moment of weakness that got complicated. Complicated enough to plan serving me divorce papers at Cannon Beach? I asked, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath. He had the decency to look ashamed. That was Olivia's idea. She thought it would be cleaner, less public. How considerate, I replied dryly. And the money? The offshore accounts? The cabin in Bend that I knew nothing about? Insurance, he admitted. The market's been volatile. I needed a safety net. A safety net you didn't include me in. Daniel's facade finally cracked. What do you want, Rachel? Name your price. Whatever it takes to make this go away. Michael started to interject, but I held up my hand. That's really why you wanted this meeting, isn't it? You still think everything has a price, that you can buy your way out of consequences, just like you always have. The prosecutors are willing to deal, Daniel said desperately. But I need liquid assets. If you'd just agree to unfreeze the joint accounts? I laughed, the sound sharp in the quiet cafe. So that's it. Your accounts are frozen. Olivia's talking to investigators. Andrew's throwing you under the bus, and you need money. His silence was confirmation enough. The answer is no, Daniel. No deals, no arrangements, no mercy. Rachel, please. 15 years. 15 years I spent believing in you, supporting you, loving you, and you repaid that by plotting to leave me destitute while you ran off with your assistant. I stood, gathering my purse. Our meeting at Cannon Beach will proceed as planned. I'll be there at the oceanfront suite you booked, the same one where you proposed. But I won't be signing your divorce papers. I'll be serving you with mine. The color drained from his face. You're still going through with the trip. Why? I leaned down, my voice low but clear. Because I want to look you in the eye when I take everything from you. Legally, ethically, completely. The way you plan to do to me. As Michael and I walked away, I could feel Daniel's eyes on my back. For a moment, I almost pitied him. He truly couldn't comprehend that some things couldn't be negotiated away or covered up with money. He'd spent so long bending the rules that he'd forgotten they existed for a reason. You okay? Michael asked as we reached his car. Better than okay, I replied, surprised to find it was true. For the first time in months, I feel completely clear about what happens next. Back at my office, final preparations were underway. Samantha had tracked down every last account and asset. Grace had provided crucial details about Daniel's professional misconduct going back years. Megan had documented every transaction that had flowed through my business, and Natalie had coordinated it all, keeping everyone focused and aligned. The prosecutors called, Samantha reported when I walked in. Daniel's bail conditions include surrendering his passport and wearing an ankle monitor. He's restricted to the greater Portland area. I raised an eyebrow. But Cannon Beach is just outside the restricted zone, she smiled. They're making a special one-time exception for your anniversary trip, given that it was booked months ago. They'll extend his monitoring range for those 3 days only. Perfect, I nodded. And Olivia? Singing like a bird, Michael confirmed, checking his messages. She's accepted a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation. Turns out she kept her own insurance, recordings of conversations with Daniel and Andrew discussing the scheme. Of course she did, I sighed. Honor among thieves and all that. Victoria's column the next morning was a masterpiece of innuendo and careful phrasing. Without explicitly mentioning the ongoing investigation, she painted a picture of a marriage at a crossroads, an anniversary trip that would determine the future of one of Portland's most prominent couples, and hinted at revelations that would reshape the city's financial landscape. Daniel would read it exactly as intended. A sign that I was still in the dark about some aspects of his plan, that I might still be manipulated at Cannon Beach. His attorney's frantic call to Michael confirmed as much. He wants to know if you're willing to consider a settlement, Michael reported, hanging up. He thinks you're posturing. Let him think that, I replied. One more self-deception for the road. The final piece fell into place that evening when Lawrence Whitmore called. Mrs. Mitchell, I've been cooperating fully with the authorities, he began without preamble. But there's something you should know before your trip. I'm listening. The Bend cabin. Daniel didn't just buy it for himself and Olivia. It's where they've been storing physical documents, bank statements, client files, things they didn't want on any computer system. My pulse quickened. How do you know this? Because some of my personal financial information is there. Things no one should have. They used it to pressure me on certain investment decisions. I thanked him and immediately called Samantha, who contacted her investigator. Within hours, we had confirmation. The cabin contained a hidden safe room with file cabinets full of documents. The prosecutors are getting a warrant now, she reported. This could be the mother lode. As the final days before Cannon Beach ticked by, I felt an almost supernatural calm. Everything was in place. The prosecutors had their evidence. The financial regulators had frozen all known assets. Victoria had laid the groundwork in the press. And I had my own final act of justice, planned. Daniel, meanwhile, was growing increasingly desperate. His text messages oscillated between pleading and threatening. His attorney called daily with new settlement proposals, each more favorable to me than the last. I ignored them all. The night. Before our departure, I stood in our walk-in closet, packing for the trip. 15 years of memories surrounded me. The dress from our first anniversary, hiking boots from our trip to New Zealand, the cashmere sweater he'd given me last Christmas. For a moment, grief washed over me. Not for what I was about to do, but for what had been lost long before I discovered his betrayal. The real Daniel, if he had ever existed at all, had disappeared years ago, replaced by a calculating stranger who happened to wear my husband's face. "Ready for tomorrow?" Natalie asked, appearing in the doorway. "Almost," I replied, zipping my suitcase. "Just one last thing to pack." I opened my jewelry box, removing my wedding and engagement rings. They felt heavier than I remembered, weighted with broken promises. "You're not wearing them?" "No," I smiled sadly. "Where we're going, they'd only be in the way." Cannon Beach stretched below our car like a postcard come to life. Misty shoreline, dramatic rock formations, the ocean a slate gray canvas that matched my mood perfectly. The same scenery that had once represented our beginning would now witness our end. Daniel drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He'd attempted conversation when he picked me up that morning, but my monosyllabic responses eventually discouraged him. Now, tension filled the luxury SUV, thick enough to touch. The oceanfront suite he'd booked was exactly as I remembered. Panoramic windows showcasing Haystack Rock, a fireplace ready for lighting, fresh flowers on every surface. The same room where he'd proposed 15 years ago, dropping to one knee as the sun set over the Pacific. "Rachel," he began as the bellhop closed the door behind us. "I know things are strained, but I was hoping we could talk. Really talk." I placed my weekend bag on the luggage rack, taking my time. "Interesting choice of location, Daniel. Sentimental." He attempted a smile. "I thought it might remind us of better times, before everything got so complicated." "Complicated," I echoed, the word tasting bitter. "Is that what we're calling fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal now?" His smile faltered. "The legal issues are separate from us, from our marriage. We can work through this together." I almost pitied him then, his desperate clinging to a script that no longer made sense. He still believed he could charm his way out of consequences, that the right words might salvage something from the wreckage he'd created. "Actually," I said, checking my watch, "we're expecting company." "Company?" Confusion clouded his features. "Who would—" A knock at the door answered his question. I opened it to reveal Michael, Samantha, and a court officer. "Right on time," I smiled, stepping aside to let them enter. Daniel backed away, alarm replacing confusion. "What is this? Rachel, what have you done?" "Nothing compared to what you've done," I replied calmly. "I'm just ensuring you face the consequences." The court officer approached, producing an envelope. "Mr. Mitchell, This is an amended complaint from the State Financial Regulatory Board, based on evidence recovered from your property in Bend. Michael stepped forward. And these are divorce papers, filed on grounds of financial misconduct and fraud. My client is petitioning for all assets to be frozen pending criminal proceedings. Daniel's face drained of color as he scanned the documents thrust into his hands. This isn't possible. The cabin was raided yesterday, Samantha finished for him. Everything in your little document vault has been cataloged and entered into evidence, including Olivia's personal diary detailing your relationship timeline and financial plans. Daniel sank onto the sofa, papers slipping from nerveless fingers. She kept a diary? That stupid vain... Careful, I cautioned. That stupid woman is currently the state's star witness against you. She's already signed a plea deal. His eyes snapped to mine, desperation replacing shock. Rachel, whatever they're offering you, I can double it, triple it. We can disappear, start fresh somewhere else. I laughed, the sound echoing off the picture windows. Still trying to buy your way out? You haven't been listening, Daniel. This isn't about money anymore. Then what? He demanded, voice breaking. Revenge? Humiliation? Justice, I replied simply. For me, for your clients, for everyone you've betrayed. The court officer cleared his throat. Mr. Mitchell, I'm also authorized to inform you that your bail conditions have been modified. You'll be taken into custody pending trial, as flight risk concerns have been substantiated. As if on cue, 2 additional officers appeared in the doorway. You planned all this, Daniel whispered, realization dawning. The trip, the meeting, everything. I learned from the best, I replied, removing my wedding ring and placing it on the coffee table between us. You taught me that timing is everything. Daniel struggled briefly as the officers approached, then slumped in defeat. As they led him toward the door, he paused, looking back at me with eyes I no longer recognized. 15 years, he said softly. Didn't they mean anything? I met his gaze steadily. They meant everything to me. That's why this was necessary. After he was gone, I stood at the window watching waves crash against Haystack Rock. Michael and Samantha tactfully busied themselves with paperwork, giving me a moment alone with my thoughts. You okay? Natalie asked, arriving just as the IDIAC police car pulled away. I searched for the right word. Not happy. The situation was too tragic for happiness. Not relieved. The journey ahead would be long and difficult. I'm free, I finally said. She squeezed my hand. Phase 1 complete. Now comes the rebuilding. The rebuilding had already begun in many ways. Mitchell Interiors was flourishing, with 3 major new contracts signed in the past week. The children's hospital funds had been restored with interest. Grace had been vindicated, her reputation restored throughout Portland's financial community. As for me, I'd rediscovered parts of myself that had been submerged during 15 years of marriage. My strength, my resilience, my ability to trust my instincts. That evening, Natalie and I walked along the shoreline as sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The same beach where Daniel had once promised to love and cherish me now witnessed a different kind of promise, the one I made to myself. What happens next? Natalie asked as we watched the waves. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. I design beautiful spaces. I help other women recognize warning signs I missed. I build a life that's authentically mine. The wind carried away my words, but not their power. Daniel had planned the perfect betrayal, carefully orchestrating every detail of our ending. What he hadn't counted on was my ability to write a different final chapter, one where truth prevailed, justice was served, and I emerged not as a victim, but as the author of my own story. Some betrayals are meant to destroy you. But if you're strong enough, resilient enough, and brave enough to face them head on, they can become the foundation of something better, something true. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.